Right, can we see my hands?
Yes.
Yes.
Goodo, okay.
Where's Helen?
So, this is what we've got. I don't know if you've printed it off. If you haven't, I'm going to leave that there so that you can all see it. Hang on one second. If I do, by the wonders of technology, can we all see this pine cone now?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Right. This might look a little bit daunting to start off with, but it isn't really. And you know my mantra is always start with the basic shapes. Now you look at this and you think, well, there's lots of little shapes in there, but there isn't really. We are looking at an egg shape. And then all we're really looking at then are lots of little triangles within this egg shape. So this is our preliminary drawing. This in loose, light pencil lines is what we're going to be starting with. So on and so forth, like so. So really, that is your kind of preliminary drawing, you know. You don't even have to get the little ends in the right place because it's a sketch. It's a half-hour sketch. We're just going to try and capture the essence of this pine cone to draw. Okay, right. Let me lead the way. Pencil, pad. Right, here we go. Egg shape. And remember, we are not trying to recreate a photograph. We're just drawing. I'll use a darker pencil because that looks a little bit light. Now, once we've got that down, we're looking at the shapes and we are creating just little triangles because we're drawing the ends of these fingers. Okay, that egg shape outline is just a guide. I don't want you to paint up to that guide. It's just to give you an idea of where the edges of the cone go to. In fact, I know I've drawn it in a little bit darker so it's showing up on camera, but I'm just going to lose a bit of that because it's a bit detrimental. Now, I'm going to leave this alone. I'm not going to use my water brush for this. And there's a very good reason. I'm going to use a traditional paintbrush because what we're going to do, we're going to paint the ends of we're going to paint the triangles and then I'm going to glaze over them to give them a little bit of a depth. So I don't want them to be too wet. So these are great for mixing your paint up to start up with. I'm going to go and pick a color that approximates to the lighter tones of these end bits here. So I'm going to get a little bit of pale yellow. Well, it's not pale yellow, it's yellow ochre, and warm it up with a little bit of brown, like so. And I'm going to create quite a light tone, quite a light mix. And I'm going to put that down, and I'm going to pick up the traditional paintbrush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start painting in little triangles, but I'm leaving a little white gap at the top for the highlight. Can you see what I'm doing? There's a white highlight on these. You know, you can see it here. When I say white, it's lighter than the rest. So look how crudely and quickly I'm doing this. I'm just painting in with a nice light tone these triangles that I've created. But I'm leaving a white dash along the top edge. And I'm keeping, the reason I'm not using the water brush for this is it's great at delivering a lot of liquid to your painting, which generally I really enjoy doing. But as I said, I'm keeping these a little bit drier because I want them to dry off so that I can glaze over the top. And a glaze is a layer of paint over a dry layer of paint. So I want these to dry off first. So that's what I'm doing so far. It looks crude, I know, but that's all I'm really going for. Not bothered if they're not in exactly the right place. Okay. Now, that, if I can catch it in the light, I don't know if I can, because it was quite a nice thin layer to start off with, that's dry, that's dry. So I'm going to go back to my colour and I'm going to darken it a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit more pigment and I'll maybe add a slightly stronger brown because there's rather a nice chestnut colour to this. And then over the existing colour that's already dried, I'm just going to put another layer down the bottom because I'm creating the shadow underneath here now. You know, I'm painting a lower layer. And this is going to give dimension and form. So can you see what I'm doing there? I'm just putting a little darker tone underneath the lighter tone. I'm still leaving that little splash of light at the top, but underneath I'm creating shadow, and this is giving them form and depth. And all I'm doing is just using a darker layer, a darker pigment. Okay, that's where I am with that. And look, that is starting to take shape. That is starting already to look rather like a pine cone. Now, I really want this to dry because in order to make these pop, we're going to paint the negative shape around these. And of course, that is this area in here. Now look, it's certainly, you know, I was talking about the original drawing we did with the egg shape. It's certainly not this negative shape inside the ends of these little fingers digs right into here. And what we need to do, we need to treat this negative shape in between the ends of the pine cones as one shape. So I'm going to, it's obviously considerably darker, so I'm going to mix up a much darker mix. I'm using the same brown and the same mix that I had before, and I'm going to make it nice and rich. And I'm going to make it darker. And the secret to making a colour darker is to add its complementary colour. Now the complementary colour to brown, I mean, a brown is a very dark orange, and if you look on your colour wheel, opposite the orange is going to be a blue. So I know that, and a brown is a very dark, murky orange, really. So I know if I add a blue to that, that's going to go much darker. I'm going to bear that in mind because I'm going to darken this down to do the deepest areas in the middle. But for the time being, I'm just going to start to try and fill in the negative shapes around these ends with one solid block. Hopefully this is dry. You don't really want these to bleed. So let's start in the middle and paint around these edges like so. And I'm looking at these ones on the periphery, these ones on the outside. dive in like this. And as I said, I want to keep this central block, this darker negative space around the ends, I want to keep this as one solid shape. I want to join it all up. Okay. Now, you know, I said I wanted to get it really dark in the middle. As soon as I've finished this, that's what I'm going to do, because I want to put the dark bits in while this is still wet, so that they blend around a little. They, you know, they merge. So here's my dark brown. I'm going to make this even darker by adding its complementary color, which is a blue now. Doesn't really matter which blue. I'm going to get a nice rich blue. I'm going to come up this end for something like this Prussian blue, like that. And as soon as I start to add this to this, it's going to get really rather dark. And now the most darkest bits, you know, the darker bits down in the depths of here, I can start to add this very dark black. Well, it's not black, but it's... And also I can start to define some of these edges. I don't know if you can see it on here, but that, you can see where, for example, that disappears down behind there and that disappears behind there. You can start to create some form in here. Oh, and another nice interesting thing to do is, if you want to create a little bit of texture, there are lines going down into the center of this cone. This is an old bit of broken credit card. So, and you can start to create rather interesting marks just by dragging the edge of the credit card, which adds interest to some of the paint that you've got down there already. You see how just scratching in with the edge of that credit card has started to suggest some of these arms that are coming out, which is rather nice. And then I'm dabbing in with the really dark stuff to get down to the bottom of. Yeah, nice. Of course, at any time, if you want to develop some of the textures and some of the lines, you can start to come back in with the pencil. And these are really rather nice shapes in here. They're these dish shapes with a little nib on the end. You can define that with pencil. You see, just just edging around them there just delivers a little bit more information. And then I can see that they've got little, they're obviously not the seeds, but on the outside are these little diamond-like bits, little cool grey nibs on the end. They're worth putting in. Okay, so I've got a lot of interest in the center. I've added a little bit of interest around these edges here. I like the shape of these ends, the little nibs on the top. So I'm doing that as well. Again, nice and keep it nice and loose as well. Right. I wash that brush, and I've got a little bit of blue down. I mean, these ends on here, they're cooler. The pine cone's a lovely brown chestnut, and these little nibs on the end, they're much cooler. They're almost blue. So I'm going to take a little bit of blue, and I'm just going to put little dibs on the end, just because I can. Even turquoise. Which is rather lovely because it's creating a pattern. Yeah. Right. A little bit of time left. I'm going to go in and I'm going to work a little bit more in these shadows. Now this is starting, well, as it dries, it means you can start to glaze over the top. And of course, watercolor being an additive medium, every time you glaze on top of a dry color, it'll get darker. So I'm going to start picking out some of the edges of these arms in here. See that? They'll all go down to the center. So I'm going to get a really nice rich mixture here. So thick it's almost like gouache. Get some more of the old blue in there to really darken it down. And then I can really start to add some depth. And I'm looking closely and trying to see where the shadows actually are. So for example, the shadows usually, the darkest bits are usually just above those little areas of white that we left on the original tips, because that's where things disappear into the depth of the cone. So nice. Okay, I'm getting warnings on my screen saying I'm running out of time. So there, that's a rather nice little pine cone study. Still come back in here and create some of the little suggest these arms going deeper into the middle of the cone like that. Now to ground this, to make it look like it's sitting on a surface, let's try and get this little shadow in here. Now remember a couple of weeks ago, what were we doing? I think we were doing, it was the pheasant, wasn't it? And I was saying, wet your paper first and it'll make your edges soft. So I'm just dampening down the paper here. This is where I want my shadow. So I'm creating a little damp layer there, just letting it soak in for a minute or two. And then I'll probably use a little bit of this shadow that I've been using for the interior of here. And I'm just going to dab it here. Now look, that's starting to bleed out into the area that I've previously wet. So I'm just going to do a little dash of, and over time, with a little bit of encouragement, that'll create a nice soft edge shadow. If it's going a bit too far, and I don't like the cut of its jib, I'll just lift a little bit of it away. If I want to get it darker, right underneath the pine cone here, I'll just dab in a little bit more colour. But that just makes it look like it's seated on the ground. And there we have it, a nice, loose. You can continue to make marks in watercolour even when it's almost dry. You can be rough with it. These scraper marks are actually rather nice because it really does look quite woody. You see these little bits coming in here are lovely. Right, I suspect we may be getting cut off at any time. I'm going to unmute you all. If anybody's got any, oh, hang on, questions. Oh, can anybody, well, you can all hear me, but can somebody say hello so I can see if I can hear you?
Hello.
Hello. Right,
Hello.
yes. Has anybody got any questions about that quickly? I think we've got a couple of minutes.
Yeah, Katie here. As soon as I put the credit card in, I just end up with cross-hatching. Look, it's sort of, it's spoilt it in as much as it looks like cross-hatching.
Oh, well, what did you do with the credit card? Did you drag it that way, drag it that way? Did you?
Probably just used it too hard, I guess.
Well, it's a case of experimentation. You just have to try it. It just makes nice, brush marky marks. And I think a lot of pleasure you get from watercolour is when it does its own thing and it doesn't look like the mark of a hand. It doesn't look like a brush mark. I think what's nice is when the medium does its own thing and starts to take on its own magic. So they're great. Yeah, it takes a bit of working with, but you can scratch, you can drag, you can, it's just another way of making a mark. You can do an awful lot actually. If you were to drag it or draw with it in wet paint, the paint actually flows into the marks, the indentation, and creates a darker mark. So it's well worth grabbing one of your old credit cards and playing with it because it's quite a revelation.
Sorry, last question. How do I stop making blotches everywhere? I'm left-handed, but you're right-handed, so there must be away. I keep blotching the paint when I'm going to add detail around the
Have you got
picture.
too much? Is it too wet? Are you getting too much water in there?
No, I just keep getting the side of my hand on it, and I get blotches everywhere on the side of the clean side of the paper.
Okay, all right. Well, work with it. Very often, you know, blotch. A lot of people now splatter their paintings because they think it makes it look alive, and I think there's something in that. So maybe you work with your hand blotches and employ them, and just say, look, this was me being here at this time, and my hand went there, and I smudged it. It's all part of the process. It's not
Lovely, thank you.
It's not a single snap of time. This is a little map of the last 30 minutes. This isn't if your hand's in there. That's absolutely fine. It's not a problem.
Thanks, Martin.
Don't worry about it. Now, looking at the contrast between that and that, next time, maybe, or it's dry, I can still go on and I can play. I need to warm this up. I need to get some lovely chestnuts in there. So I might spend 5 minutes now just adding a little bit of red. I can go, this is all dry, so I can glaze over the top and I can start to correct the color. I can go in and I can say, okay, well, that needs a little bit of red in there. Look at that. Just a little hint of, and that's suddenly bringing it into line with the colors there. But because it's a glaze, the underneath color is showing through, and it's not really affecting the integrity of the painting. It's just warming it up. That's rather nice, isn't it? That's cheering it up. Just a little dash, just a suggestion. It's a sketch. It's a half-hour sketch. It's not a study. I'm worried I'm going to lose you, so I'm going to say bye, but I'm going to carry on. I'll just cut out at any minute, I'm sure. But it's been lovely to have you all here, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, no, that's nice, that little bit of red. There might even be a little bit of purple. I might go and try and put a bit of purple in the shadows. Because I've got a rather nice purple here. Something like this, right in the deepest depth. There is a slight kind of magenta hue down there, I think. Let's have a look. Again, because it's a glaze, it's adding to the colour that's already there. It's not suddenly going to go purple. It's just going to give a purple glaze to it. See that? I can just stroke down with a little bit of that. That's giving it more depth. It's warming up the whole image. If it's looking a little bit regular and a little bit uniform, dab it off. This is another vital mark-making tool in your arsenal, a little bit of kitchen roll. I'm going to carry on. I'm going to try and define some of these edges here. Now those lovely shapes that I went in and did with the pencil, I can refine those now. Oh, somebody's... Thank you for your little messages in the chat box, they're sweet. This is not quite black in here, so I can carry on adding more colour until I get right down to a deep, deep value. So I'm going to carry on with this. And the more that I do, the darker it'll get. And the deeper the tones in there will be, and the more depth the picture will have.